Welcome back to another episode of Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today we're going to be sitting down and talking a little bit about pressure. When a woman or a man is facing an unplanned pregnancy, it can be really hard to avoid pressure from people within your community. So we would like to welcome Kristen, who's a social worker out of our Allentown office of Adoptions from the Heart. Welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Kristen, can you kind of jump into your experience of working with clients and how pressure around them, whether it's family, close friends, their support people, sometimes interjects into what's happening?
Yeah, so obviously all of our clients have loved ones who are affected by an unplanned pregnancy or adoption, someone who's considering an adoption. So we often counsel women about their support system and how their support system feels about them exploring their options. Sometimes women and men experience a lot of pressure from grandparents, from sisters, from aunts and uncles who are really connected on their day-to-day life, who have, feelings about them placing a child with essentially a stranger in the beginning of the process. So sometimes they have pressure to not make an adoption plan. Sometimes they have a pressure to make an adoption plan when a woman or man is unsure of what they want to do, and maybe they're considering parenting, but their family really feels like they don't have the resources to parent. Sometimes they have pressure to have openness when they may, be not sure if they want openness, and sometimes they have pressure to not have openness because they think it will be too hard on their loved one. Sure. So it really is a lot for women and men who are considering adoption because their loved ones are affected by this decision too.
Yeah. If we know that we're working with a client who's considering adoption and we have, birth grandmother who is really stepping in and trying to put her opinion on the table, what are some ways that you counsel your client?
Yeah, so we counsel the birth grandmother. We can provide her education about what open adoption is. We have a lot of great webinars for extended family members. We can give them support by maybe connecting them with someone who's been through the adoption process, and telling them more about our adoption process, explaining openness, what it looks like, maybe involving them in the openness if that's something that they want, and really just giving them support and resources on what adoption is so they can support their loved one. Really explaining to them, what their loved one is going through, so they can kind of take a step back, so they can just be a support to the expectant mother rather than providing this extra pressure while she's trying to make a really big decision in her life.
Sure. And there's always variables that come into play if she's younger in age or he's younger in age. If they rely on their family financially,
right,
sometimes that can influence their decision as well, which can make it a little more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our expectant parents come to us and they're residing with birth grandmother who maybe it's really hard for her to go through this pregnancy with the birth mother, and then she's potentially losing a family member on the day-to-day basis too. Or maybe it's on the flip side of things where birth grandmother is already helping her parent other children, and she can't imagine expanding their resources for another child and pressuring her to make an adoption plan. So really sitting down with them and providing a plan and showing them what it will look like to parent versus adoption, and providing support to both parties, because at the end of the day, adoption doesn't just affect the birth mother, it really affects the whole family.
Sure. I know I recently had a situation where a birth father's mother had stepped in. So he found out she had the baby, and his mom was very, very just set on, that's my child. You're not taking my child and placing my baby for adoption. And it took a minute for us to really sit down and talk through what exactly open adoption is. Because that's another piece to it. Oftentimes, birth parents may understand the way open adoption works, but the people in their community don't. So this particular birth grandmother didn't understand that we're not the foster care system. We're not just taking your baby and placing your baby with a family that's going to get a check every month. Totally not what we do here with private adoption. And once we sat down, counseled her on what open adoption looks like, who this adoptive family was that the birth mom picked, she totally came around.
Yeah.
And she really respected the process and ultimately said, okay, I get it now, and I'm going to support my son in choosing adoption.
Yeah, letting them meet the adoptive parents,
Yep.
you know, involving them in the yearly picnics, or involving them in the legally enforceable contact agreement.
Sure.
So they also have the reassurance that, you know, I'm part of this child's life and I am going to be involved in the openness. Can sometimes really help the extended family members.
Yeah, I love sitting down and meeting extended family of our clients, because when you hear someone say, this is maybe isn't what I would do, but I respect that this is what my
Right.
child is choosing to do, to me that just melts my heart, because that shows like you're a good parent.
Yeah.
You're really letting your child do what they feel they want to do, not what you want to do.
Yeah, and you're empowering your child
Yeah.
to make their own decisions. You know, because a lot of times our clients will say to us, you know, my mom is going to provide me support, but I don't know how long.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know if she's going to provide support for the first week of my child's life, and then what?
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, and sometimes that does happen, and women come back to us and say, you know, the support that I thought I had wasn't there.
Sure.
And then they end up placing.
Yeah.
So really just having these conversations beforehand is so important, and not overlooking the extended family members.
Well, and if you're a woman who's parenting 2 children and your family is not there to help support you with those children,
You know.
it's so hard when family steps in to try to pressure you and say, I'll help you, I'll be there for you. Well, what does that help look like?
Right.
Are you going to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning when that child is screaming?
Right.
Are you going to help me pay for my bills? Most likely not, if you're not doing that for the children I'm already parenting. So
Right.
it's also important that when we're counseling clients, we really talk through what is that help and support going to look like,
Yeah.
realistically.
Yeah, because family dynamics are tricky in anyone's life. So making sure that, you know, we really have these conversations, these clear-cut conversations about what is this going to look like, you
Sure.
know? And if you don't think you're going to be there at 3 o'clock at night, maybe you would be open to having a little bit more openness, and creating a relationship with someone who can be there, you know, 24/7 when you place them in the adoptive parent's home.
Well, thank you, Kristen. I
Yeah.
mean, facing an unplanned pregnancy is scary. And the reality is you have to figure out what's right for you and not for anybody else in your world. And while people care and love about you, you really have to make that decision based off of you and your choice and your life. So thank you.
Yep.
Thanks so much, guys, and tune in next week.